Psychologist Clare Rowe joins me now. Claire, this is fairly profound testimony from a father and tech expert. What's your professional opinion about ADHD symptoms and the amount of time kids are spending on screens?
Okay, so beyond a doubt, there is research coming out, and this is the thing, it's completely emerging. So we're going to know the answer to this in 10 years' time. Could be too late for a generation. But there is research coming out showing that kids who have excessive screen time compared to their peers are twice as likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. Now, what our viewers may not realise is a couple of things about ADHD. One, we don't have a test for it. Okay, there is no test for ADHD. We don't have a brain scan or a blood test or something. It's based on self-report of symptoms. And the second thing is we don't actually know for sure how ADHD is caused. And in fact, we know that we may have been concentrating too heavily on genetics in the past. And we know that it's far more of an interplay between genetic vulnerability and your environment. So I absolutely think this happens. I think, is there a new subset or form of ADHD? Kids on screens are displaying ADHD symptoms. And I think that's because they live in this world, and even as adults, we know, right, where there is excessive kind of stimulation and we're switching screens and there's a lot going on. And then we come into the real world, which perhaps is a little bit of a slower pace and a little bit boring, and there's a little bit of irritation and inattention. So absolutely, I think, I've said it before, this is just another reason, the negative impact on screens, particularly on primary school age children, far outweighs any positives, if there are positives. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we're saying, oh, there's educational positives and we've got to teach them to be digital natives. I don't buy that argument at all. I think in the future we will look back and think we were just sitting 6 and 7-year-olds on iPads and it's destroying their brains.
Now, more information is coming out about Joel Couchy, the 40-year-old Queensland man who carried out the horrific Bondi Junction attack over the weekend, killing 6 people. He was known to Queensland and New South Wales police for mental health-related matters. They say his attack on Saturday had no links to any religion or political ideology. Joel's parents have said he was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was 17. He'd been medicated but came off it recently because he said he was feeling better. Claire, this case has sparked new discussions about the state of mental health care in this country. What are the resources that are available for people with schizophrenia, and are they readily available for people who want treatment, and are they affordable?
Yeah, so they are readily available. We've got, like many other things, 2 options, being the public system or private. And obviously, if you go into private care, whether that be inpatient or outpatient, it can be very costly for those that can afford it. But there is patient care for those with psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia in the public system. Again, that involves things like consults with a psychiatrist, pharmacological medication, as well as psychological interventions. So that is available in the public system. I think the question here is more to say, being mentally unwell, having a psychiatric disorder is not illegal. And unless you are scheduled under the Mental Health Act, of which there is several reasons that you can schedule someone, that is, hold them against their will and treat them. Namely, they have made threats against other people's lives or their own. But unless they do that, unless you can hold them against their will, you can't force someone into treatment. And that is, a human right, and that is a whole ethical question in itself. If you have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, should we make it illegal that you don't, take medication? And that's going to be very hard to police. And we know with psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia, the symptoms can be quite focused in what we call a period of psychosis. So that can be days or weeks where you have those delusions and paranoia. But people can go for months, if not years, without symptoms. And so in those periods, there is a danger that they will start feeling better and they will stop taking medication. Now, that is more of the question. And I understand the public's need to want to kind of see the the chink in the system to say, aha, here it is, and if we fix that, Bondi won't happen again. But, presumably this person, like many others, did not appear presenting with someone making threats that they were going to kill people. Otherwise, that would have been a very clear reason to detain them and hold them against their will. But when they don't do that and they're feeling okay, they have a legal right to go off medication. It's not what's advised, but we can't force someone into treatment. And therein lies probably the bigger question and the problem.
Now, before you go, I want to ask you about marijuana use and serious psychological conditions, because there is a global trend in the West to decriminalise marijuana for personal use. But is that risking these psychiatric disorders becoming considerably worse and people suffering psychotic breaks?
Potentially, yes. So we know that I understand the argument to decriminalising cannabis use is to make it more open, potentially safer use of it, and of course reducing, the backlog in legal repercussions. But yes, we know that there's such thing as called, cannabis-induced psychosis, and that's characterised by symptoms of paranoia, very much like schizophrenia, and we've known for a very long time that there's evidence suggesting that ongoing use of cannabis is going to exacerbate any individuals who have some type of vulnerability to mental health already. So, yes, cannabis use can absolutely induce psychiatric episodes, psychiatric disorders. So if we are going to make this argument that it needs to be decriminalised, we absolutely need to have the conversation. Well, does the public health system now need a whole heap of more money to be enhanced to do with potentially an increase in cannabis-induced psychiatric conditions? Yeah, and I don't see that conversation happening at the moment.
No, we're not seeing that conversation at all. Clare Rowe, thank you so much for your insights this evening.
Thanks, Rita.